AI is something you build towards. In this fireside chat, Kevin Tallman, CEO of Mango Voice, shares why laying the right foundation is the key of making AI actually work inside real businesses. Drawing on experiences like healthcare practices and call data, we'll break down how small strategic steps lead to faster workflows, better service, and real business impact, why industry-specific AI beats generic tools, and how to know when a market is ready. And finally, the most common mistakes companies make when verticalizing AI and how to avoid them. Whether you're just starting your AI journey or refining an existing strategy, this session will give you a practical blueprint for building AI solutions that last. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Good, Michael. It's always good to see you, and grateful to be here and talk about really an important topic that we're all kind of grappling with right now.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think it's on the minds of everybody right now, and trying to figure out how to move forward in this AI space is definitely key. So I guess we'll begin with how everyone's talking about AI, but real adoption is messy. When you started building Mango AI, what everyday problem are you trying to actually solve for people?
Yeah, I think at Mango we have a little bit different approach.
I don't think we can hear you, Kevin. We'll do a subtle cut. Yeah, I think we got you now. Nope, can't hear you.
Okay, now he's muted.
Now you're muted in StreamYard.
It says that his mic isn't connected. So I couldn't mute him.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Do we need to start over? Sorry.
We can start over. I mean, I'm sure that the beginning will be better if we start over too. So.
Okay. Listen, third time's the charm, Michael. Let's go.
And they say that for a reason,
Listen, it feels right. It feels good. Let's make it happen.
Cool. AI is something you build towards. In this fireside chat, Kevin Tallman, CEO of Mango Voice, shares why laying the right foundation is the key to making AI actually work inside real business. Drawing on examples like healthcare practices and call data, we'll break down how small strategic steps lead to faster workflows, better service, and real business impact, why industry-specific AI beats generic tools, and how to know when a market is ready. And the most common mistakes companies make when verticalizing AI and how to avoid them. Whether you're just starting your AI journey or refining an existing strategy, this session will give you practical blueprints for AI solutions that last. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Good, Michael. How are you? It's always good to see you, and excited to talk to you about this really important topic.
Yeah, good to see you too. I think it'll be really insightful for everyone here who's sort of both experienced in AI and trying to get their foot in the door. So while everyone's talking about AI, real adoption is still really messy. When you started building Mango AI, what everyday problem are you actually trying to solve first?
Yeah, I think for us at Mango, because we have a very vertical focused kind of go-to-market strategy, what it does is it really helps us understand the nuances to the market. So our core market right now is dentists, and we currently service over 10,000 dental offices, and so we really understand at a very deep level what some of the constraints within that market are. And by understanding our core customer, we're able to really build features that help with workflow automation. So the idea is, what are some tasks that are currently taking place in the practice today that we can automate away with AI functionality? And that's really how we've started our journey. And instead of taking kind of a really wide swath and saying, hey, AI is going to solve all your problems, let's look at what's one specific task that you're doing that is very manual in nature, and is it within kind of our sphere that we operate? And let's build, through some AI tooling, let's build workforce automation here and automate some of these manual tasks with AI. And so that's really been how we've started to think about AI. I would say in very kind of small incremental steps, but identifying those points within the practice that we know we can address and build AI tools for that is going to help the office be much more efficient.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. I guess you've built and scaled companies in multiple industries. Like, what lessons from those experiences are shaping how you're approaching that AI sort of step today?
Yeah, I think the first step, regardless of AI or not, Michael, is scale's very difficult. And to be able to get scale right is incredibly, incredibly hard. And you just got to be very thoughtful on how you do it. And the reason I say that is I've seen companies scale so fast that they supernova. When you supernova, what happens is you forget about the customer experience because you're so hyper focused on growth that you lose sight of the most important piece, which is that core customer that you're building software for.
Yeah.
And so, I think the big lesson I've learned is if you stay just vigilant and hyper focused on that customer and their experience, you're going to have a lot better chance of scaling whatever it is you're doing in a much better manner. It's not saying it's not messy, but that's really been our focus, especially at Mango, is, just staying really vigilant to that experience. And then, like I said, what are some AI tools that we can provide that help that office become more efficient, right? So I think that's the thing, Michael, is like stay focused on the things that matter.
Yeah, that makes total sense, Kevin. I guess, so why do you think then building AI for like a specific industry is maybe more beneficial than doing a general tool? Like, we see a lot of general tools out there, like, hey, this email service will do everything you possibly want all over. Like, why do you think, targeting a specific industry and solving those needs is so impactful?
I think one of the things that I personally believe in is I want to be involved in things that have maybe less breadth and more depth. And the reason why is because once you get entrenched in these markets, you just really understand, like I said, the nuances to the market. And specifically when we start talking about AI and how do we build impactful AI tools, one of the biggest things you need is good quality data. And the more kind of vertical, in my opinion, the more verticalized you are, the better data set that you have. So, for example, if you come to dental, Mango has one of the best data sets in all of dental.
Yeah.
Well over 1 billion calls in our database. These are calls that we're interacting with patients, we're interacting with payers, all these, kind of nuanced conversations that we have. And you think about the richness of that data set and what it allows us to understand from those interactions, and then how impactful that becomes as we look to build the AI tools.
Yeah. I guess, so when do you know that you're ready to build a verticalized AI within your industry? Like, what did you see with the call data you had in dentistry and healthcare practices that you're like, okay, we can take that first step?
Well, I think the first thing, as a leader of a business, you have to be thinking about every day is how are we going to incorporate AI into our platform? That has to be kind of your overarching thesis right now. And I'm not saying, at least for us, and kind of our thesis is, maybe AI right now is not going to solve all our problems, but there's certainly problems to be solved. And our first thought should be, is there AI tool that we can build that will address this? So that's number one. I think number two is, as we've been able to, look at our data and really start to shape it and understand it, it's becoming clear that there is certain aspects within the business that we know we can address. But what's been cool is that data has been telling us the story. I think sometimes, we're so anxious to get something out there that we forget about the all important component, which is product market fit.
100%.
And making sure that we really know we have product market fit. I see this all the time, which is people are so anxious to get to market that they're trying to impose what they think the market needs versus listening to the market. And so from our relationships and, our position in the space and our data, starting to marry those two things together, we're getting a very clear picture of, one, what the market wants, and then what that's going to look like within the Mango platform.
Got it. Yeah, I get. So it's definitely got to listen to the market. Got to understand what it's actually calling for in terms of AI. Where do you think AI is still falling short when it comes to helping businesses build these relationships with their customers and helping automation and fulfilling market needs?
The thing I'm seeing a lot is there is a lot of hype around AI, and I think there's some I think certainly interesting aspects to it. I think in a lot of cases it still falls short. And when you look at just the sheer capital investment into AI and then look at the return on those investments, we haven't seen them yet. That doesn't mean that they're not going to materialize, but we really haven't seen that to a large degree. And so that's why I think we've been much more surgical in saying, let's find those key pieces and invest in that, right? And so I think for us, it's much more of kind of a methodical, nuanced approach versus like scorched earth approach.
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah, 100%. Do you have an example of like when really diving in and sort of going deep with one verticalized AI tool is really outperformed just more of a general, broader tool?
Yeah, I think, an example here at Mango is, late Q4 last year, we launched what we called Mango AI, which was starting to do, some interesting things around phone calls and opening up data sets to offices. And there was a few kind of key pieces within Mango AI that really addressed what I talked about, which is taking away manual tasks and using AI to automate those and actually create greater transparency for the office. Mm-hmm. And, since we launched that, really it's one or two features within there that have just really been impactful for practices. And now we have thousands of practices that have adopted that technology for one simple reason. It's made their life easier.
Yeah.
And I think that's where AI is really impactful. When you find those, little kind of, it's almost treasures where it's like, oh man, we can address that. We can do it. We can do it really well with the technology that's available today.
Yeah.
I think there's still some bleeding edge technology. I know you guys are working on it. We've been, kind of strategizing together on this front as,
it's been fun.
Voice agents, for example. Mm-hmm. And anybody that's been part of a real-time system, which is voice agents, realize just as the massive complexity of trying to do that, and then trying to
really go anywhere. Yeah,
exactly, and doing that at any type of scale. So I think there's still some things that, the technology isn't quite there, but I think it's rapidly approaching that, which is super exciting. And that goes back to really how we feel like we're positioned with our data set, that we are positioned really well as those technologies continue to emerge to be able to build solutions for the market.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And kind of we went towards the tool side, and you mentioned it, that the data set or the call data we've been talking about is really the basis of that. Like without, like those are sort of the raw materials for the tools that we're making. Can you kind of go into what having a strong foundation in that data set, in that call data, like takes, and why that's so important when you're building these out?
So one thing, as you're building voice agents, one of the hardest parts of this is that these don't hallucinate, mm-hmm. right? That you essentially don't leave them to their own devices. And, I think about this in my life. I've got a 9-year-old son and a 7-year-old son. And if I was to leave them at home by themselves, I don't know what's going to happen. We may come home. The house,
I don't think anyone knows. Yeah.
Like, who knows what's going to happen, right? But if we put some controls around them, right? Mm-hmm. Like one of their older sisters stays home with them, there's a high degree of confidence that everything's going to be just fine. Yeah. And I think good data around these models is really kind of that moat that starts to say, hey, we get really confident with how these are going to respond. Mm-hmm. And the way we're thinking about this at Mango is, let's take a practice, for example. We can go download the last 5 years of every call that they ever made. And we can then develop and say, hey, what's the 50 most asked questions that this practice gets?
Yeah.
So going in to build, that model for that practice, we already know the 50 questions that they're going to get asked. And now you start talking about what's the prompting we want for those, right? And that's really, the secret sauce. And so instead of trying to throw a generalized model at an office, we're throwing a very specific, kind of prompted model at that office, knowing that these are the questions they're going to be asked and how we want to respond to those.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, the better material you give it, the better material comes out of it. It's really about setting it up to succeed, and then allowing, using the prompt to enhance the data, not necessarily fix the data. 100%. I guess, so, as you verticalized, I imagine that you've had some trial and error with figuring out how to really go deeper with your AI. What are some mistakes that you have experienced or you're seeing others experience in terms of verticalizing AI?
I think one of the things that, initially we really struggled with, and I can admit it, which is almost kind of this FOMO mentality, which is, well, if we're not doing something, we're losing. And not being really kind of thoughtful and strategic about how we want to approach that. And I think you kind of alluded to it, which is taking kind of this broad brush and saying, we're just going to build something that everybody in the market's going to want. And as we did that, we just realized if we're not really careful right now, we're going to fall on our face. And this is not going to materialize, right, in the sense of adoption from the market. And that's when we really kind of stepped back, Michael, and we said, okay, let's break down every aspect of the office, and let's just hone in on very specific tasks within that office, and that's what we're going to address. And then we'll move to the next one and the next one. So instead of this kind of broad approach, it was one task at a time. And then we have to think about too, within those tasks, is this an area that Mango touches? And is it something we should solve? Or should it be something that we collaborate with a partner on? And so that's part of this conversation too, Michael, which is going to our partners, our integration partners, for example, and saying, hey, we see this task in the office as something that AI can address, but we need to do it with you.
Yeah.
And that's been, I think, really exciting from our perspective, is having those conversations with our partners and getting them to see what we can do together versus what we can do individually, which is really exciting for us.
And I imagine that those partner conversations are super impactful to how you guys move forward with your AI development and deployment. I guess one question, different kind of conversation here, is like, how do you really take customer feedback into how you're deploying and utilizing AI? Like, I'm sure everybody has an idea of how it can solve that one problem that they have. Like, how do you take in the good and sort of orchestrate and understand how to navigate the bad?
Yeah, I think this is, for us, something that we work really hard on, which is, being really close to our customers. We want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we do it in a couple of ways. One is we can do it through our support channel. We field close to 11,000 calls every month from customers. And I still think, I think some people kind of think it's crazy, but having those touch points, human to human, are still really valuable, because we get a lot of great insights from those customers, whether it's good or bad, right? So we're bringing that data point is from actual interactions with customers. Two is being very ingrained, right? Whether it's through our partners, or like I said, through our support channels, we're able to get a lot of data from our partners as well on what they're hearing from their customers.
Yeah.
And put that perspective, with our partners, Michael, we're talking well over 100,000 offices in the market that they're getting feedback to, that's coming back to us. So that's been really good value. And then the other thing we've done is we've done some surveys and just asked offices, specific questions about AI, but even overarching, like, do you even have plans to implement AI in your practice? And, a large cohort still says no. And I think because no one has been able to clearly communicate to them what the value prop of that is and what it's going to do.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think communication really is key there, making sure that everyone's on the same page and moving forward together. I think that's spot on, Kevin. I guess looking at the future, I mean, there's still such a collection of people out in the world. I think you used cohort, and that's a great word for it. There's still so much untapped potential there. What do you see verticalized AI specifically going like the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some really incredible opportunities for companies. And I think this goes back to, really the innovator's dilemma, which is, what are you going to do as a company? And I think if you're not deeply contemplating how AI will disrupt you, you are not thinking about the right thing.
100%.
And, interesting enough, I was, meeting with my partner a couple of weeks ago, and he always asks me this question at least once a month. What keeps you up at night, Kevin? And I said, there's one thing that keeps me up at night, and it's AI.
Yeah.
And, it's just allowed me, I think, to really think about how AI could actually disrupt Mango.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about, if I was going to disrupt Mango, what would I do? And that's been part of our kind of core strategy around this, is thinking a lot around, that aspect of the business. And I think it's helped us really think differently. We obviously want to focus on our core customer and continue to drive value for them. But we're also thinking about what's that innovator's dilemma and what's the disruption that is potentially around the corner. Because this technology, I think, I'll say I think, because I don't know definitively, Michael, I think it potentially is massively disruptive.
I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd agree with you. I think there's no way you can look at what's happening right now and not see the change that's just imminent. What's something that you think everyone should really do this next quarter as we sort of end out Q2? I guess we're right in the middle of Q2 and going into Q3. What if you had to challenge everyone to take one step forward in AI? What would you recommend?
I think the first thing is, one of the things you can do is look internally too and say, what's some tooling we can use internally? Because I think we want to use internal tools that use AI because we want to know what that experience is like as well.
Yeah.
I think what that does is that gives you a frame of reference of what will my customers experience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
It's not the same thing, but it starts to get you and your team, one, to know what that experience is like, and two, I think it gets them thinking about what's possible within our platform.
Yeah.
We've been able to do this with like our support team, for example, and we've built some really cool internal tooling that has made our support team massively more efficient. And a lot of this is because we started to expose them and say, hey, play with this.
Yeah.
And so now what we're doing is we're saying, before you ask for a new tool, you have to think, will AI solve this problem first?
Yeah.
That is the first thing. And if you haven't thought about that, don't even bring it up.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great insight, is really self-adoption and implementation into your own workflow will empower you to enable it within your customers' workflows, really walking a mile in their shoes. I guess going back to when you first started sort of this AI journey, what's one thing that you wish you knew that if you can go back in time, you'd tell yourself?
I think, one of the challenges I have personally as a CEO is I'm not an engineer. I'm not overly technical.
Yeah.
And, I always tell our dev team, the trust that I have to have with you is incredibly important, because I can do any job at Mango except for what they do.
Yeah.
And I think if I had to go back, it would probably be really starting to have deep conversations with our engineering team and saying, what are the tools that you guys need to better understand this technology? And probably starting those conversations a little bit earlier and getting them thinking more and more about how do we do this. I'm confident we're there right now, Michael.
Yeah.
You know, you could always argue and say, should we be where we're at today a year ago? Sure.
Yeah. There could have been less pain there.
Potentially, right? Or we're a little bit farther ahead. It is what it is. Like, can't live your life in the rear view. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably one thing we potentially should have done earlier.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's great insight. I think as we move forward, it's always important to learn from where we came from, right? And so sort of understanding, you know, what you would have done different and make sure to actually apply it to how you move forward is really, really impactful and valuable there. So
yeah. And I would say the other thing that has been really impactful for me personally, right, is I mean, you work for him, Dave. You know, spending a lot of time with Dave and having, you know, pretty deep philosophical conversations about this. You know, I think Dave has a pretty unique kind of viewpoint on this.
Yeah.
And, in a lot of ways, not in a lot of ways, in some ways, I think he's converted me in some aspects.
Sure.
But that's been, you know, really helpful for me. And, you know, we still talk almost every day, and a lot of it is around AI and, you know, what we're learning.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I learn something new every day with it. You know, you feel like you get a grasp, and then either a new tool comes out or a new article comes out, and all of a sudden it opens a new door. So I think continuing to push forward and learn and grow is and find those mentors, find the people that you can, you know, work with and talk to, I think is super valuable. Awesome. Well, I think that sort of wraps up what our conversation, Kevin. I really appreciate you being here and you know, taking the time. Any final thoughts you wanted to add before we sort of head out and allow the fine people at the Talk AI Summit to continue on with their day?
No, I think one thing would be really cool. I don't know what your guys' plans are, but to circle up in 6 or 12 months and talk about, you know, what are the additional things we've learned and what's been rolled out. And I think more importantly than what's rolled out, Michael, is what is being monetized. What are people actually paying for? So that would be super interesting.
I think we just froze a bunch, so I think we got to redo that part.
Okay.
Cool. Just say from like the outro part again.
Yeah.
What? I kind of just winged that. Is there a preference to the way I should do it instead?
No, you just do the same thing. Like, do you have any final thoughts?
Great. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Anything that you wanted me to say and said, Kevin?
No, I think what you said is fine.
Great. Awesome, Kevin. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. You know, I think it's super valuable to sort of see where AI is going and talk to people that are really leading the way there. Before we sort of give the fine people at the Talk AI Summits time back, you know, let them go on with their day. Any final thoughts you have on where AI, where Mango Voice is going with it? Anything there?
Well, first of all, Michael, great job today. You did an awesome job, and appreciate the questions. Appreciate you guys, you know, including Mango in this important topic. I think what would be super interesting would be to circle up in 6 or 12 months from right now.
Yeah.
And basically go back to this conversation and say, you know, what have you learned over the last 12 months? What products have you launched? You know, we're excited about some products we're going to launch this year, specifically around AI. And I'd love to talk more about what we've learned from that. And I think the cool thing is not only launching a new product, but when customers actually pay you for that, because that's when you know you have product market fit, which is a sweet spot. So love to circle back up with you, maybe talk deeper about that. But until then, we'll just keep grinding on this AI thing and see if we can crack the code.
I can't even imagine what will happen in 12 months. That's like going to be a whole different world that we live in.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Well, excited to talk then, Kevin, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Hey, thank you.